Today we will analyze the plot of the dramatic thriller of 2001 called The Glass House. Ruby Baker watches horror movies with her friends. While the others cower in their chairs in horror, Ruby only smiles. After the session, the baker goes home because it's late and she doesn't want to quarrel with her parents again. In the morning, Ruby has breakfast with her parents and brother Rhett and then goes to school. There she arranges with her friends to go somewhere in the evening. Today Dave and Grace Baker are going to a restaurant to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. While the parents are having dinner together, Ruby is having fun with friends, driving around the city at night and secretly smoking. Returning home, the girl notices a police car. Ruby is nervous. You think her parents are looking for her, but the cops break the news. Dave and Grace died a few hours ago in a car accident. At the funeral, Rhett wants to make a speech, but because of the tears, he can't utter a word. Then family friends Dr. Aaron and Terry Eyes rise on the stage and the men make a touching speech. A little later, Uncle Jack comes up to Ruby and offers to turn to him for help if necessary. When asked why his uncle didn't come for 10 years, Jack replies that he lives far from here. When the dead are commemorated at home, Ruby goes to the kitchen where she meets their family lawyer, Alvin Beglater. The man gives his business card and says that the teenagers agreed to shelter the eye and in addition, the parents left enough money for the guys not to worry about the future. Then the Eyes come and comfort the grieving Ruby. A few days later, teenagers pack up and leave for Malibu to the Voices. The guys are amazed to see their huge glass mansion. The hosts show the guests the house, introduce them to the worker Vicky, and temporarily settle the guys in one room. In the evening, the Eyes treat the guys with delicacies, but they refuse to eat it and ask to order pizza. After dinner, Ruby is embarrassed to change next to her brother and goes out into the hallway. She hears a noise from above and notices a receding shadow. The next day, Ruby goes to a new public school instead of the promised private one. She confidently introduces herself to the class, but gets lost when asked about the reason for moving to Malibu. Returning home after school, the guys find gifts from the Eyes. A set of discs for Rhett and a bunch of new fashionable clothes for Ruby. A little later, the girl tells her friend on the phone that her classmates are too correct. They don't even protest when they are banned from using pagers at school. Aaron interrupts and calls her into the kitchen. The woman confesses that she is eavesdropping on a telephone conversation and asks the girl to be more respectful of the order in the new school. When Ruby falls asleep, her mother comes to her, but unfortunately it turns out to be just a dream. Upset girl puts on a swimsuit, goes for a swim in the pool of voices near the house. Suddenly appears Terry, who decided that thieves had penetrated to them. The owner helps the girl to get out of the pool and gives a towel, lewdly looking at her body. Terry forbids swimming at night because everything is heard through the glass walls and adds that it will set off the alarm. The next day, Ruby is at the driving school watching a video about the dangers of drunk driving and can't hold back her tears as she remembers her parents. In the evening, the Eyes ask about driving lessons, which makes Ruby nervous, and she goes to the bathroom for painkillers. Aaron comes up and tries to comfort her. Then Ruby lies about not feeling well because of her period. The hostess widgets the girl into her own bath, where Ruby notices a lot of potent substances in the locker. Aaron gives the guests a powerful pill that makes her so relaxed and distracted that Ruby doesn't pay attention to her brother's loud video games. Waking up a couple of hours later, the girl sees Rhett asleep in front of the TV. Putting her brother to bed, she hears a loud argument of the owners. Ruby comes closer, but Dash notices her, draws the curtain and leaves. The next day, Ruby tells a classmate how she was severely punished at her last school when she downloaded an essay from the internet and got caught on it because instead of doing her homework she was having fun at a party. Upon returning home, Terry asks Ruby to go with him to the work-related premiere. We promise that he will return her home soon and she will have time to do her homework. Instead of the premiere, the man takes the guest to the restaurant and tells how he met her parents. Ruby asks about their argument with his wife yesterday, to which Terry replies that this is just a family showdown, adding that he is very lonely with Aaron. When Ruby reminds her it's late, the men are driving her home very quickly and aggressively. He nearly crashes into another car and comes to a stop on the side of the road. Terry leans very close to the girl but slows himself down and simply fastens her seatbelt. Ruby comes home and goes to the hall for textbooks and notices Aaron asleep with a syringe in her hands. The girl does not like what is happening and she goes to the fugitive to tell him about the antics of the voice. The lawyer reminds that if custody of the guys is taken away from the eyes, then they will go under the protection of the state. The girl is very much asked to help, adding that she persuaded the housekeeper to throw her here. He promises to look into the situation and reveals that Ruby and Rhett's parents left Ruby and Rhett $4 million. As soon as the girl leaves, he calls someone and informs about her visit. After dinner, the eyes send Rhett to his room to talk to Ruby. The couple explains that Aaron has diabetes and she injects herself with insulin every night. Eyes ask the guest to trust him. The next day, when the housekeeper doesn't pick up the Ruby from the driving school, the girl has to walk to the GI company owned by Terry. The secretary asks to wait for the boss in the lobby where Ruby sees that aggressive creditors are demanding that Terry return the money borrowed from them. The girl is nervous and decides to wait downstairs in the garage. She is horrified to see her parents' car when Terry shows up and takes her home. On the way, the man says that the housekeeper didn't pick up the girl today, since he fired her for the fact that Vicky drove Ruby to the city without asking. The girl does not understand how the Glasses learned about this. At dinner, Ruby notices Terry entering the house alarm code and secretly writing it down on a piece of paper. Later, the girl pretends to be doing her homework. In fact, she searches the internet for information about the accident in which her parents died. Ruby then emails the fugitive to clarify details about the accident. The girl has no strength left and she falls asleep right in front of the computer where Terry finds her. The man smiles as he sees the unfinished scene on the screen. In the morning, Ruby discovers that someone has finished her essay for her. She thanks Terry for her help, who cryptically replies that it would be wrong while winking at her. At school, Ruby is called to a meeting with the social services inspector. The girl talks about the oddities of the Glasses, worrying that they will punish her for snitching. The inspector suggests that when checking, they pretend that they are unfamiliar. When a couple of days later the inspector comes to the glass house with a check, the Glasses are ready for it. They prepared separate rooms for the kids, hid all the video games and hard drugs. To the question of the inspector what Rhett does in the evenings, the guy does not lie that he reads books. When the Glasses leave the room, Ruby scolds her brother for lying, but he claims that he learned it from his sister. Angry, the girl snatches the box from her brother's hands and throws it into the trash. Ruby, in a bucket, notices two important documents. The first is a letter from a private school. The administration regrets that the Glasses changed their minds about sending their children there, so the schools return the initial cash contribution. The second card is for Jack's uncle, asking his nephews to call him and come visit. Ruby discreetly rips off her uncle's phone number and hides a piece of the card in her jeans. Later, Terry comes to Ruby's and asks how the girls are in her new room, to which the guest replies that it is very timely. As the owner leaves, Ruby wants to email the fugitive, only to find to her dismay that her account has been deleted along with the lawyer's email address stored in it. When the home phone rings, the girl picks up the phone and hears how creditors demand that they turn over their debt. The owner declares to the creditor that he found his huge extra piggy bank and almost catches the girl, who manages to hide behind the closet. When Terry goes to bed, Ruby saves the number from which the creditors called in the memory of the phone. At school, a girl calls a bugler by a payphone. The lawyer says that the BMW on which the parents of the children crashed belongs to the Glass company. Ruby realizes that her parents died through Terry's fault, but does not have time to tell the lawyer about it, as the head teacher calls her to him. The teacher accuses Ruby of copying essays from the internet just like she did at her last school. And the head teacher adds that it is unlikely that after that the girl will be able to continue their studies. At home, in response to the allegations, Terry tells Ruby that it's time to take charge of your life. A girl gets up in the middle of the night, looks at an advertisement for a boarding school for girls, and tries to call Uncle Jack, but gets an answering machine. Ruby steals the owner's car keys, wakes up her brother, disables the alarm, and steals the Glass's car. However, the brother and sister have to stop because the road was blocked due to a landslide. The police asks Ruby to show the rights and documents for the car which she does not have. At that moment, the Glasses arrive and take the guys home. Dumbfounded Terry denies all accusations. Having reached the place, Ruby tries to run away, but the owner drags her into the house by force. The two fight inside. Terry overpowers the girl and threateningly declares that one child will be enough for them to access the parents' bank account. Aaron appears and injects the guests with a sedative. A month passes. And Ruby's new classmate is surprised that the girl has not appeared at school for more than 4 weeks. Creditors are increasingly pressing on Terry. Then Glass has to go to the bank and ask for another loan, ostensibly to build an additional wing in the foster home. The banker refuses the client because Ruby managed to fax them a letter from a private school about a refund of tuition fees. Meanwhile, Aaron's addiction to drugs grows stronger. The Glasses have been keeping Ruby on a sedative for a month, preventing her from recovering, so the woman steals a large amount of potent drugs from the hospital where she works as a doctor. The head doctor, having learned about this, fires Aaron and she loses her medical license. When the Glasses quarrel once again, it turns out that Aaron is heavily addicted to drugs after Terry killed the Bakers. The woman wants to abandon their cruel plan, to which the husband replies that they will have to finish the job. Terry adds that Ruby needs to get rid of and leaves for the city to get drugs since his wife no longer has access to drugs from the hospital. Aaron takes the last syringe out of her stash and watches an old video of her playing with little Ruby. The feeling of guilt torments the hostess so much that she injects herself with a large dose of a potent drug. In the morning, Ruby finally wakes up and is horrified to discover the body of Aaron, who died from an overdose. Terry soon returns with the found morphine, finds dead wife and hears Ruby giving someone their address on the phone. The girl wakes up her brother and the guys, trying not to make noise, run out of the mansion. However, Terry manages to grab the boy. Ruby tries to save Rhett, but Terry grabs the teenagers and throws them into the basement. The guys are trying to break the screen on the window and get out while Terry does something with his Jaguar. The teens see Terry park the Jaguar outside the house and then go back inside and fall asleep on the couch. Rhett manages to escape and steal the owner's car keys, who is really only pretending to be asleep. However, Ruby thinks everything that happens is very suspicious. Doorbell. On the doorstep is a fugitive who had to come because Terry didn't answer his calls. The lawyer reports that Glass's trustee account has been blocked and the bank has launched an investigation. Turns out it was the fugitive who told Terry about all of Ruby's activities, naively believing that he was acting in the interests of the teenagers. A red Ferrari drives up to the mansion from which Terry's creditors exit. Two aggressive men go inside and claim that Aaron called them, when in fact it was Ruby. Terry again repeats that he has no money and blames the runaway for everything. The outraged lawyer wants to leave, but the creditors rush at him and kill the man with a knife. Intruders tie up Terry and want to take him away in his own Jaguar. The owner begs to go to the Volvo, however, opening the garage, the creditors see that the cars have punctured wheels. He will shout when creditors seal his mouth with tape and throw him into a Jaguar, which one of the creditors sits behind the wheel, and the second one drives a Ferrari. As soon as two cars leave, Ruby throws a knife with which she cut the wheels of the Volvo. On the road, the Jaguar loses control and pushes the Ferrari into the oncoming lane. After a few hundred meters, the Jaguar has left the road and rolled over. Brother and sister are walking along the road when a policeman notices them and offers to help. Getting into the car, they pass next to the crashed Ferrari and get to the crash site of the Jaguar. The cop tries to find survivors, but Terry knocks him out. He takes the policeman's barrel and goes to his car. Ruby sees Terry jump behind the wheel and abruptly reverses. However, remembering that her parents died because of the glasses, the girl presses the gas pedal with all her might and knocks Terry to death. After a while, the brother and sister come to the grave of their parents, and Uncle Jack promises that no one else will dare to offend them. Thanks for watching to the end. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and watch our next video if you are interested in the topic of retelling.